face those kidnapping and robbery charges that could send at least one of them away if convicted.
They had 3 months to get this stuff. They had 3 months to get warrants. They didn't get warrants that night. They didn't get warrants the next night. They didn't get warrants the next month. They didn't get warrants the month after. They waited 3 months to get warrants on whether or not there's guns, whether or not there's jewelry. How about their cell phones? How about the computers?
Memphis is unique. They have the Memphis Safe Task Force there currently, which was kind of a help in a lot of this. So it's really just coordination and pre-planning.
Pooh Shiesty lost everything, and it all came crashing down inside a courtroom. Just months ago, he was one of the most talked about names in rap co-signed by Gucci Mane, dominating playlists and building what looked like a long-term run at the top. But now, he's sitting in a federal detention center, denied bond, and staring at charges so serious they could keep him behind bars for life. And the reason? Prosecutors say he didn't just fall off. They claim he crossed a line that shocked even the industry, allegedly kidnapping and robbing his own label boss Gucci Mane during what was supposed to be a routine studio meeting.
This week, 9 individuals, including well-known musical artists, kidnapped and robbed at gunpoint numerous victims at a music studio in Dallas, Texas. Lontrell Williams Jr., also known as Pooh Shiesty, 3 music industry professionals traveled to Dallas for a scheduled business meeting. Lontrell Williams Jr. arranged this meeting purportedly to discuss the terms of his recording contract with one of the victims.
But here's where it gets even more confusing. While Pooh Shiesty remains locked up with no way out, some of the people tied to the same case, including his own father, were granted bond or house arrest. That contrast alone raised eyebrows and made people start asking, what exactly did the court see in him that they didn't see in everyone else? Behind all of this is a deeper story, one involving contract disputes, rising tension inside a major record label, and what federal prosecutors are calling a calculated setup, not a random situation gone wrong. Because what really happened inside that Dallas studio might be very different from what fans first believed.
Including videos shows Pooh Shiesty or Big 30 had a gun or threatened Gucci Mane in alleged Dallas kidnapping robbery.
Pooh Shiesty's rise wasn't slow, it was explosive. After linking up with Gucci Mane's One Tell Febin label, he quickly became one of the standout voices in the new wave of rap. His music carried a raw energy that fans connected with instantly, and with major cosigns backing him, it felt like he was locked in for a long run at the top. Everything about his career pointed upward. Streaming numbers were climbing, his name was ringing across the industry, and he was building a brand that looked bigger than just music. Then, almost overnight, everything flipped. In April 2026, Pooh Shiesty, real name Lontrell Williams Jr., was arrested alongside multiple others and hit with serious federal charges, including kidnapping, armed robbery, and conspiracy. The headlines spread fast, and the reaction was immediate. Fans who had just been celebrating his success were now trying to make sense of how things escalated this far.
The fans update is even worse than I thought. First off, Pooh Shiesty is the dumbest human being on earth. You don't get much stupider than Pooh Shiesty. So they brought the contract to the studio. Pooh Shiesty told Gucci Mane, hey, can I holler at you in the private room? Gucci said, yeah, they go to the private room. Pooh Shiesty said, hey, listen, could you sign me out of this deal? Sign this contract and release me, please.
What made it even more shocking was the timing. This wasn't a situation from years ago catching up to him. This was recent, active, and unfolding in real time. One moment he was building momentum, the next he was fighting for his freedom in federal court. And while the charges alone were enough to shake his career, the details behind them made the situation even harder to ignore. Because the real story didn't start with the arrest, it started months earlier inside a studio session that was supposed to be about business, but quickly turned into something much more serious. According to federal prosecutors, everything traces back to January 10, 2026, inside a Dallas recording studio. What was supposed to be a straightforward meeting between Pooh Shiesty, Gucci Mane, and their associates quickly took a turn that nobody publicly saw coming. Investigators claim the meeting wasn't as innocent as it looked. Instead, they allege it was carefully arranged ahead of time, part of a larger plan rather than a spontaneous situation. The accusations are serious. Prosecutors say Pooh Shiesty entered the studio armed with an AK-style weapon, immediately shifting the tone of what was supposed to be a business conversation. From there, things allegedly escalated fast. He's accused of demanding to be released from his contract with Gucci Mane's 177 label, turning what should have been a negotiation into a high-pressure situation.
The complaint alleges that on January 10th of this year, 3 music industry professionals traveled to Dallas for a scheduled business meeting. Lontrell Williams Jr. arranged this meeting purportedly to discuss the terms of his recording contract with one of the victims. As alleged, Williams Jr. produced an AK-style pistol and forced one of the victims to sign a release from the recording contract at gunpoint.
And according to the complaint, it didn't stop there. Authorities claim that Gucci Mane and others present were robbed of valuables, including watches, jewelry, and cash during the encounter. What makes this case stand out isn't just the robbery allegations. It's the way prosecutors are framing it. They're not calling it random. They're calling it coordinated.
And robbed the other victims of Rolex watches, jewelry, cash, and other high-value items. One of the victims was actually choked by one of the defendants to the point of near unconsciousness.
In fact, the entire situation is being described as a planned kidnapping plot, with multiple people involved and specific roles assigned. A level of organization that, if proven true, takes this case into a completely different category. And just when it seemed like the situation couldn't get more serious, investigators revealed something that may have already been tracking his every move before that day even happened. Because what the feds had on him might be the detail that changes everything. What makes this case even more serious isn't just what prosecutors are alleging, it's what they claim they can prove. At the time of the incident, Pooh Shiesty wasn't moving freely. He was already under court supervision from a previous case, placed on home confinement and required to wear an ankle monitor. That detail alone changes everything, because it meant federal authorities weren't starting from scratch. They already had a way to track his movements. According to investigators, that monitor provided a digital trail, placing him exactly where he was during key moments tied to the alleged incident. Instead of relying only on witness statements, prosecutors are leaning on location data they believe connects him directly to the scene. And that's not all. Authorities also pointed to social media activity that raised even more suspicion. Posts allegedly showing large amounts of cash, jewelry, and luxury items began circulating not long after the incident.
The document notes that Pooh Shiesty had just been put on house arrest on October 31st, 2025 for a firearms charge. And a part of his conditions for this house arrest was that he would not possess any deadly weapon or knowingly be in the company of a person possessing the same. And his Instagram account later posted stories of him having a Rolex, a large amount of cash, and tagged Dallas, Texas as his location. Now, is the point to get away with the crime or not?
Investigators believe those images may be connected to the reported robbery, giving them another layer to build their case on. From the prosecution's perspective, it paints a picture that feels structured and traceable movement data, online activity, and multiple individuals all tied together. But the defense is pushing back hard. Pooh Shiesty's attorney has argued that despite all the claims, key pieces of evidence are still missing. No confirmed contract has been presented, no weapons have been officially recovered, and none of the alleged stolen items have been definitively tied back through physical evidence in court. His legal team is framing the case as incomplete, suggesting that what's being presented publicly may not fully hold up under scrutiny.
They waited 3 months to get warrants on whether or not there's guns, whether or not there's jewelry, how about their cell phones, how about the computers. That gives me great pause when I see a case that takes that long to get warrants, if you believe everything that was said on the evening that it occurs.
They've even questioned the timeline, pointing out that it took months for arrests to happen, raising doubts about how clear-cut the situation really is. So now, the case sits in a strange place. Prosecutors confident they have a strong, detailed narrative, and the defense insisting that critical proof is still missing, and those unanswered questions only made the next moment even more intense. Because none of that debate mattered when he finally stood in front of a federal judge. On April 7th, Pooh Shiesty walked into a federal courtroom hoping for one thing: release. But that's not how it played out. After reviewing the case, federal judge Renee Harris Tolliver made a decision that immediately shifted the direction of everything. Bond denied, no release, no second chances for now. The reasoning was direct and hard to ignore. The judge pointed to his prior legal history, combined with the fact that he was already under home confinement at the time of the alleged incident. To the court, that raised serious concerns about whether he would follow any future conditions if released again. Then came the bigger issue, public safety. The court determined that the nature of the charges, along with the prosecution's evidence, suggested he could pose a risk to the community. That alone is one of the strongest arguments for keeping someone in custody, especially in a federal case. Prosecutors reinforced that argument, emphasizing the severity of the accusations and the level of coordination they believe was involved. From their perspective, this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a serious situation that couldn't be taken lightly. His defense team tried to counter that narrative. They argued the case wasn't as solid as it seemed, pointing to gaps in physical evidence and calling the situation unusual, especially given the delay between the alleged incident and the arrests.
But certainly there have been media posts of individuals that we suspect were involved in that evening where they're denying that it occurred or they're denying that they're giving statements to the government. I think that's unusual as well because of what the government put forward today seems to negate those statements, but we'll have to see how this all shakes out.
They pushed the idea that this might not be as clear-cut as prosecutors claim, but in the end, none of it changed the outcome. The judge stood firm, and with that decision, Pooh Shiesty remained in federal custody, no bond, no release, and no clear timeline for when that might change. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get more surprising, another detail came out that made the situation even harder to understand. As details from the case continued to unfold, one development stood out more than anything else. While Pooh Shiesty remained behind bars, some of the very people tied to the same case were given a chance to go home. That includes his own father, Lontrell Williams Sr., who was also facing serious federal charges connected to the same incident, was initially granted bond with strict conditions, including house arrest and financial requirements. For many watching the case, that immediately raised questions. How does one person walk free under supervision while another stays locked up completely?
And this is how they do you. Lontrell Williams Sr., the father of Lontrell Williams Jr., aka Pooh Shiesty, gets a bond set by a federal magistrate on his first appearance. The government goes to the district judge and says, hold him. We want to exercise our right to revoke that bond after review by a district judge, a review of the magistrate judge's decision. Now,
the contrast didn't go unnoticed. At the same time, federal prosecutors made it clear they weren't backing down. They began pushing aggressively to tighten restrictions, even filing motions to challenge release decisions and keep key figures in custody. Their actions signaled just how seriously they're treating this case and how determined they are to control every aspect of it. In total, 9 people have been charged in connection to the situation, including rapper Big 30 and others allegedly involved in the incident. Investigators believe this wasn't a one-person situation, but a coordinated effort involving multiple individuals. But even within that group, Pooh Shiesty's situation stands apart. He remains at the center of the case, the one prosecutors are focusing on the most, the one still being held without bond, and the one facing the heaviest spotlight as everything unfolds. And as complicated as the legal side already looks, it turns out this entire situation may have started because of something deeper, something happening behind the scenes long before that studio meeting ever took place. Because behind all the headlines and charges, there's a bigger issue that most people didn't see coming. As more details surfaced, a possible motive began to take shape, and it shifted how people looked at the entire situation. At the center of it all is an alleged contract dispute. Prosecutors believe the Dallas studio meeting wasn't random. They claim it was tied directly to Pooh Shiesty trying to force his way out of his deal with Gucci Mane's 1,000 Wellbull. What may have looked like a business conversation on the surface could have actually been a breaking point after months of tension behind the scenes. Reports suggest the relationship between artist and label had been strained for a while. Nothing fully public, but enough pressure building quietly that, if true, it may have led to a desperate move. And that's where things get even more complicated. Singer and songwriter Muni Long stepped into the conversation online, offering insight into how these contracts actually work. According to her, many record deals include what are known as morality clauses, rules that can drastically shift control if an artist gets into legal trouble. In simple terms, if an artist ends up facing serious charges, they can lose leverage, rights, and even financial benefits tied to their deal. In some cases, it can make leaving a contract even harder, not easier. That detail changes the entire perspective. Because if that's true, then any extreme move to escape a contract wouldn't just fail, it could backfire completely. Instead of gaining freedom, it could tighten the situation even more. So now the question becomes harder to answer. Was this really a calculated attempt to break free from a deal? Or was it something else entirely, something that escalated further than anyone expected? Either way, the alleged motive adds another layer to a case that's already full of unanswered questions. But just when it seemed like the story couldn't get more chaotic, another voice entered the conversation and made things even louder. Just as the case was gaining national attention, another controversial name found a way to insert himself into the spotlight. 6ix9ine, to quote, "6ix9ine Reese, he didn't waste time jumping into the conversation. During a live stream, he made a bold claim that instantly caught attention across social media. According to him, Pooh Shiesti's label allegedly paid him to stream music, suggesting the goal was to help generate money for mounting legal fees tied to the case. The claim spread fast. No confirmation, no clear evidence, just a statement that added fuel to an already intense situation. And whether people believed it or not, it did exactly what you'd expected."
Right? Even just say Pooh Shiesty beats this case, he has to face a federal violations under probation that's up to 5 years. Kidnapping and a charge, it's A spec. I had C specs.
Brought even more eyes onto the case. Now, instead of just a legal story, it became a full-blown industry moment. Between federal charges, contract disputes, social media speculation, and outside voices adding their own narratives, the situation started to feel bigger than just one artist. It turned into a reflection of how quickly things can spiral when music, business, and legal trouble collide. At the same time, the contrast was impossible to ignore. On one side, you had 6ix9ine recently released, rebuilding his presence and speaking freely online. On the other, Pooh Shiesty locked in a federal facility, waiting for his next court date, with limited ability to respond to anything being said publicly. The gap between those two positions says everything about how fast circumstances can change. And now, with rumors continuing to spread and the case still developing, the industry is watching closely because no one knows exactly how this will end. And after everything that's already happened, it all comes down to what happens next. Right now, Pooh Shiesty remains in federal custody, waiting for trial, waiting for more details to come out, waiting to see how a case this serious will ultimately unfold. The charges he's facing aren't minor. If convicted, he could be looking at years behind bars, possibly even life in federal prison. And with no bond granted, every day leading up to that trial is spent on the inside. There's still a lot that hasn't been fully revealed. Evidence will be challenged, arguments will be made, and eventually, the full story will come into focus inside a courtroom. But as it stands, the situation is as serious as it gets. Not long ago, he was one of the most talked about rising stars in rap. Now, his future is uncertain, tied completely to the outcome of a federal case that continues to unfold piece by piece. And that leaves one question hanging over everything. Did one decision destroy everything? Or is there still more to the story that hasn't been revealed yet? Let us know your thoughts and comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like this video to support the channel. Subscribe to Holly Height TV for the latest updates and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Until next time, peace out.